You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now present the Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Welcome to the Health Hub on Radio Maria Canada, exploring cutting-edge health and wellness information and therapies, helping you to take your health to the next level. I'm your host, Kathy Biasi, and I'm a holistic nutritionist and a professional cancer coach. Today on the Health Hub, my guest is Dr. Laurel Mellin, and we will be discussing how to achieve sustained weight loss through her science-based therapy called emotional brain training, and how tackling stress and seeking out joy could be the secret to managing weight. Dr. Mellin is a New York Times bestselling author and the innovator behind emotional brain training, serving as an associate professor at the University of California, San Francisco. Emotional brain training is a brain-based method that teaches individuals to transition from stress to joy, addressing issues like overeating, anxiety, and depression by rewiring emotional brain circuits. Mellin's work, which emphasizes resilience, well-being, and the pursuit of purposeful life, represents a shift in healthcare towards using technology for learning and support. Her latest book, 123 Joy, continues to inspire those on their journey toward sustainable health. In the show, we talk about, why do we turn to food in times of stress, how emotional brain training fits into a sustained weight loss lifestyle, and why do we have emotions at all? All of these things are really important in her push towards using emotional brain training as a primary force for weight loss. Please stay tuned. We will be back in just a few minutes to talk with Dr. Mellin. Welcome back to the Health Hub, everybody. Today's session has been recorded. Please do follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RMC on all those locations. Dr. Mellin, welcome to the show.
What a pleasure, Kathy. Thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time to come with us to tell us about this wonderful technique. Hopefully that's the right word to explain what you're doing in the weight loss space. It always has been a confusing space for people to be in. And now with the introduction of quick fix medications, it's adding a whole new twist to this area. As we all know, there is an obesity crisis, a diabetes crisis in our time. So I think with your credentials and what you're bringing forward, this is a very promising technique to get people really to understand and on board and taking control of their weight loss and their goals. So with that long introduction, how did you get into this space?
Well, probably having my own problems. I was a young woman with eating and weight problems, and I was lucky enough to be able to be on the faculty of the University of California, San Francisco, and they really didn't know what to do with me. I was part of an interdisciplinary grant. So I followed my dream, which is I wanted to figure out the root cause of overeating and weight gain. And to make a long story short, which is 45 years worth of work, is what happened.
We have 40 minutes, so you go ahead.
What happened is I knew I was out of control with food. And as I was a researcher, because I'm a scientist, I'm looking at the fact that the current methods, which are cognitive or mindfulness or awareness or drugs, simply were not getting to the root cause of why we overeat and tend to gain weight. And what I did was I began to explore the literature, because that's what we do in academics, right? Explore the literature. And I found this one study way back in 1940 that said the root cause in childhood obesity, and that's always really revealing what's going on early in life, was lack of emotional connection. And I was then 28, I'm now 75. And I said, "Oh, I get it. You know, when you're that young, you think everything's easy, right?" So I said, "I'll just teach the families emotional connectivity tools, and that should solve the problem." So these very simple tools that are still part of what we do, but of course now it's based on neuroscience. And what happened? Lo and behold, it worked. And one day, this mother who was in the program with her daughter, and her daughter had been stealing food from the kitchen, taking money out of her purse and then going to buy sweets. She was a 10-year-old that was essentially obsessed with eating and very unhappy. And what happens is she says, "What did you do with my daughter? She doesn't care about the food anymore. And in fact, she wants to go outside. She's in joy." And in that moment, I knew that I would be a really bad person if I didn't dedicate myself to finding out what magic had occurred in that young girl's brain. And so I just have followed it all these years. And it took about 25 years before the neuroscience research was done that showed that the problem is the emotional brain, that the brain that controls our eating and weight is not the neocortex. We know what to eat, we just can't do it. It's in the emotional brain that controls all our chemicals and also our drives. And so the same tools became much more effective and much more sophisticated now that we had the science. We made them into a skill set that is really not just for obesity, but for any disease. Let's say that you have cancer, or let's say you have anxiety or depression. The emotional brain controls our physiology. The circuits in that brain do. And these tools are emotional tools because they are emotional circuits. They don't listen to awareness. They don't listen to thinking. You use these tools and you get to what's called brain state 1, which is optimal. Brain state 5 is stress overload. And in that state, anything that could go right does, and your chemicals tend to balance out. So it's essentially the foundation of medical care. Get the chemicals going well, and a lot of things take care of themselves, and people recover faster from problems. That's emotional brain training.
So a few things are popping up into my head as we're speaking. There is a genetic component to some cases of obesity and excessive weight. I am assuming that that's still the case.
That is the case. However, it's minor, and it's a few people.
Okay.
There's a tendency. The issue is in the United States, there's been a huge increase in obesity that is separate from anything genetic. Typically, the genetic is more likely sensitivity to stress.
Okay.
As humans, the number one thing that we do, all of us, this is our shared genes. People have more sensitivity than less. When we are stressed, remember, stress in the brain is considered a threat of annihilation. It doesn't matter whether it's metabolic stress, physical stress, or psychological stress. The brain chemically reacts to stress as if we are going to die. And so what does it do? It makes us hungry. It makes us store the fat. So the more stressed we are, the more we store the fat, and the more we eat foods that tend to produce metabolic stress. So there's another component. And then we go out because we're in the world and we're being judged for our body size, more stress. So essentially, the epidemic of obesity is a symptom of one thing: untreated chronic physiological stress overload. That's the diagnosis. The number one diagnosis for mental health, chronic diseases, obesity, is untreated chronic physiologic stress overload. That means that inside us, it's not that we're tense. Inside us, we have stress chemicals surging. When you stop those stress chemicals from surging, and we do this with emotional brain training, it is unique. It is the only program that's been designed to switch off and rewire the stress response. You get changes that you can't get from a medication. I mean, even comparing it to the weight loss drugs, it's not even comparable. Because essentially with weight loss drugs, there are 8 different major chemicals that are activated by stress that cause us to be hungry, lethargic, depressed, overeat, and gain weight. 8 of them. One of them.
Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
One of them is GLP-1. If you inject one of them, first of all, you torque the whole system because homeostasis is very sensitive, and you miss out on many of the other 7 that are causing the problem. So it's not natural, and there are consequences as a consequence of that.
When we're talking about stress, the nasty hormone is cortisol, which, it's given a bad rap, just like estrogen is given a bad rap. There is a necessity for these hormones within our body. But you say chemicals, and when you say chemicals, are you talking hormones? And then to go on from that, and this is observational, maybe you could clarify, is it women that have the most issue with weight gain? And can we designate some of this hardness of being able to control our weight with hormones?
Absolutely. One of the most important things are the 8 chemicals are cortisol. You're absolutely right. Here's what happens is the cortisol is activated. That's the lead hormone in weight gain is cortisol. Secondly, that cortisol drains serotonin, and also it drains dopamine. So you're going to feel bad if the cortisol is rushing, and particularly chronically. Once you feel bad, what happens? But our world gives us these foods that are very addictive, that just light up the brain with the desire to have these sugary, fatty foods. So if you're feeling stressed and depressed and unrewarded, what are you going to do but have drives to do that? At that point, you're going to eat just the foods that increase your insulin. And so insulin is the next part of that. And what it does is it blocks leptin from allowing you, so you feel like you're starving all the time. So those are 4 of the chemicals. So we're talking about serotonin, we're talking about cortisol, dopamine, and insulin. And then there's ghrelin, and there's PYY, and there's GLP-1. So there's 8 of them that are really affected, and definitely with hormones, particularly, as you well know, women that are still cycling, I've gotten past that part of my life, but just the psychological and the physiological effects of menstruation and the cycle, and the fact that we're dealing with estrogen, which is another problem here. So what I'm saying to you is that women are more vulnerable. Women psychologically tend to have thinner boundaries. So that means that in general, tend and befriend means we have thinner boundaries. And so other circuits in the brain that cause us to behave in certain ways and be vulnerable in certain ways are a relational circuit, which is a merge circuit. So let's say you're a woman and you go out and you gain weight then, and you have a skinny boundary. In general, emotional adults say, look if you don't like my body, that's your problem. This body size is right for who I am genetically and in my life. And so, go take a leap. But women also are vulnerable because that tend and befriend tendency means that they may be more influenced negatively by the judgments of society. They don't have a thick enough boundary naturally. So in emotional brain training, we don't just treat the food, we treat that you have a circuit in your brain, because all of these are circuits that determine how you respond in life and whether you're stressed out or not. The circuits in the brain you can shut off with these emotional tools. So the first thing women do when they come into emotional brain training is they just get used to being able to take their gnarly feelings like depression and shame and hostility and anxiety. All of those feelings that we all get stuck in are really just stress feelings. And they learn that when they have those feelings, don't judge them, but use the EBT tools and spiral up out of them, shut off the stress response, shut off the stress chemicals. So they get used to getting out of stress and into the optimal state for physiology, which is joy. Joy is not happiness. It's that connected feeling that's also, really feeling rewarded and as if, really a sense of purpose. So that joy state biologically is tagged as brain state 1, and they get back to that and they start to feel, oh my gosh, I have control over my emotions. That's a good thing. And then once they do that, they've warmed up, so they can go after the circuits in their brain that make them more vulnerable to weight gain or health problems. Same thing for depression and anxiety, but we're using weight here. And they learn how to rewire their survival circuits. And this is something that everyone should know about, is that we all have these circuits called survival circuits. And what they are is any time in your life, like I was 11 years old and I had just come home from school, someone had been bullying me, and I came home, I didn't know how to talk about my feelings. I was really ashamed about the fact that, I was being tortured like this at school. And I come in, and what happens is I see cinnamon rolls on the counter, those big cellophane packages, with the white frosting. And so I just reached for the cinnamon rolls, and I ate 3 of them, okay? And of course, in our family, my father had diabetes, and we were very careful with food, and you don't just go and take food. And so I felt ashamed of that, but I didn't know the neurobiology of it. If you have a fight or flight response, and some people know when they're in fight or flight, when they're really stressed, other people have stress styles where they just go numb, or they go into this false high, oh, everything's fine. But all 3 of those stress styles, way high, way low, or numb, chemically are still having the stress hormones rage. This is called a survival drive. Whatever you do in that state to feel better, whether it's go numb, whether it's to get depressed, whether it's to eat, drink, spend, whatever, gets glommed together with the survival circuit. This is extremely important. So now I woke up the next morning. I didn't know this. Again, the neuroscience wouldn't be completed for decades after that. But I had a fight or flight drive, a survival drive to eat, okay, to eat sugar. Okay. So again, once that's encoded, if you don't process your emotions that day, if you don't know how to do that, what happens, process your gnarly emotions, not just the happy emotions, it gets encoded in long-term memory, and it is potentially there for life, pardon me. And the only way that you can get rid of that drive is to get to that same level of stress again and have the tools, which we have in EBT, to erase the circuit. If you stay above your stress level and just try to cope, try to be mindfully aware, try to think things through, trying to get everything right, you're staying essentially in a state that does not rewire the circuit. The circuit keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then women go through perimenopause and menopause. And what happens is these survival circuits that they never rewired in their younger years really take hold. And then they feel out of control. So what we say is warm up with emotional brain training by learning resilience, learning how to shut off those stress states. Do that about a month. You get your brain warmed up and you go straight in. And the first circuit you rewire is your food circuit. So the message in my food circuit was I get my love from sugar. So it's always a fundamental need, like existence, safety, love, protection, because that's what these survival circuits do. But somehow it got logged in with something that wasn't going to make me safe at all. In fact, made me miserable because I was really out of control. So that's the first circuit. And then usually there's a mood people get stuck in, usually a relational pattern, either distancing from other people or getting overly involved and rescuing, pleasing, and such. That love circuit or that relational circuit is really detrimental to anyone who's vulnerable to overeating. Because if you can't get rid of your tendency to merge and people please or distance, you miss out on oxytocin, because you get oxytocin, that love chemical, which is also an appetite suppressant, only when you can stop the merging and distancing, just be connected to yourself and give love, but set limits too. So that love circuit. And then the big one is the body circuit. And this has really been undertreated. And I think we're the only program that treats it, because what happens is when you gain weight, what happens is your brain adjusts. The brain is beautiful. It'll adjust to anything. Of course, there's prices you pay for that adjustment, but it will adjust to anything. So it adjusts to being heavier. And all of a sudden, because the brain likes sameness, if you are a certain weight, it protects that weight. It wants you to hold on to that weight. It might make you feel safer to be in that weight. And so most people have a body circuit where they either judge their body very terribly, and then the brain naturally responds to that and says, I'm going to hold on to this weight as long as I can because I'm holding on to these judgments. Or you actually need to have the extra weight. The survival circuit tells you you get your safety from holding on to that extra weight. And so those four circuits, once people rewire those four circuits, they don't even care about the food. It's almost like you had this wonderful lover, and then essentially you fell out of love and you say, hey, what did I see in that person anyway? But literally, it is effortless to eat healthy. And the reason is biochemically, you are different. You are not activating those 8 chemicals anymore. And when you're not activating those 8 chemicals that make us hungry and gain weight, then you go back to a whole different way of being biochemically that promotes healthy eating and health in general.
I think when you're able to teach people about the physiology of what is going on, people are able to grasp and be able to have an understanding that I can change my physiology. When it's an esoteric thing and all we do is talk about food associations and this is your reward, it is so much harder for us to find a path to weight loss. So anytime you can talk about physiology and give a direct path as to the good and the bad, I think you are doing a great service, because that is something we can take on ourselves and say, I can change my physiology. I have done it before, and go through the steps. I have a question on the tip of my tongue, but I think we're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in just a few minutes, and then we're going to continue along with the physiology part and get into some of the areas that don't do us much service, maybe the food industry and how they, the chemicals involved with that too. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
You are listening to The Health Hub here on Radio Maria Canada, a Catholic voice wherever you are. To contact us and be a part of the show, email thh@radiomaria.ca. We now continue with the program. Here once again is your host, Kathy Biasi.
Welcome back to the Health Hub. Our guest is Dr. Laurel Mellin. I love this conversation for many reasons. I would really appreciate if you could, for part of this second half, help people to understand how the food that we eat and the timing of the food that we eat can cause these bad associations with food that therefore leads to having to be into the EBT training. And as a for instance, a child gets upset and, we don't throw them a salad. We'll give them a lollipop, and I don't know where that has come from, whether it is the physiology, because let's go back on that. Cortisol causes a desire for sugar. And so perhaps that has just been inbred, that you've got an upset child here. We'll soothe the child physiologically with sugar. Can you break down that aspect, how it fits into obesity? I know this is a great big thing. And then tell us the biggest benefit to EBT within all of that.
Oh, what a great question. EBT started with childhood obesity, as I mentioned, and right now we have a crisis in obesity. We also have a crisis in self-regulation in children. Children don't know how to process their emotions. And because right now stress is so high, it's not enough to say, how do you feel? What do you need? They need the EBT tools to break down those anxiety emotions, just expressing a certain set of emotions: angry, sad, afraid, guilty. Just one sentence essentially turns off the stress response. But the parents are up against a lot because they're stressed too, and they want to just solve the problem for their children. I have 3 children. When children are crying, and it's very annoying, it's very stressful. Parents are feeling pulled in all directions. And what happens is, when a child is feeling bad, the easiest, quickest way to make a child feel better is give them sugar. Because what it does is it calms down the cortisol and it ramps up the dopamine. But the question is, it would also be easier not to send your children to school and not to make your children make their bed or whatever they do. So as parents, what we need to do is get up against the fact that we are stressed too, get these tools for yourself so that you can stay in that state of connection. And then when it comes to the kids, when the kids are upset, teach them EBT. Teach them, what is your stress level? Is it 1, feeling great, 2, good, 3, a little stressed, 4, definitely stressed, or 5, stressed out? They don't even have to say their feelings, but they tell you what their stress number is, and you get them and they get you. And essentially in that moment, it's hugely opportunistic to be able to tell the child, yes, you're at brain state 3. Let's do the brain state 3 tool. And what they will do is they will express one statement of anger. I'll show you. I feel angry that I feel bad. I feel sad that she was nasty to me. I feel afraid that I'm never going to feel better. And I feel guilty that I keep on doing the same thing. And immediately after they express those 4 feelings in that order, the cortisol is shut off. And they are conscious of positive emotions. They say, I'm grateful that you're talking to me. I'm happy that you love me. I feel secure. I'm okay. And I feel proud that I'm talking to you about it. 8 feelings, and they are back to brain state 1. All of those 8 chemicals that drive overeating are shut off. So these are very simple tools. So the best thing for parents is to say, don't blame yourself when you give your child food like that. No shame, no blame. But it'll be easier more of the time if you are able to stay at that brain state 1, where you can absorb some of their difficulties and their crying and all this stress, and redirect them to use those moments as moments of opportunity to train them how to process their emotions. If you do that before the child is 12, you will have not a rocky road in adolescence. And being that my children didn't always learn those tools, I know that it's hard. Adolescence can be very hard. So for parental protection, be sure to teach your children these skills.
I have a question I want to interject into here. So back to obesity and the childhood obesity crisis, and just with the template running through here that we're trying to reduce stress. One of the issues of childhood obesity is inactivity. So if you introduce as a stress buster, let's say, a walk or some sort of physical activity, is that part of your process when you're doing the EBT program?
EBT has 3 steps to it. And it's because, as you well know, everyone knows they should exercise. Everyone knows they should eat healthy. And hardly anyone does it. And the reason is we tell ourselves with our thinking brain, I should exercise. And the emotional brain says, forget it, because it pulls up a no-stop weight biochemically. So what we do with EBT, sure, is fantastic. I taught my children, by modeling, they'll do what you do, not what you say. And you incorporate activity and healthy eating into your lifestyle so that they learn it. They're conditioned to do it. It feels normal for them to do it. But in the EBT program, this is what we say. We say for too long, people have been punished because they're out of control with their food, or they simply won't get up off the couch. Stop the punishment. This is biochemical. The stress response, which is activated by circuits in the emotional brain, that emotional brain training gives you the skills to shut off in 1 to 3 minutes, right on the spot with an app. First, get hold of your stress. And I would say that to all parents. If your child is acting out in certain ways, the first order of business is to say they are stressed. They don't know how to process their emotions, and they're scared. And so they're doing things that aren't good. So even for adults, you start off with clearing the stress so people know how to get out of that stress ditch so they're not biochemically driven to do things that they feel bad about and they're unhealthy. The second thing is, and this is how the brain works, the brain has a stress center, a reward center, and a habit center. It's called the stress triangle. It's in the emotional brain. It's controlled by emotions, not by thoughts. So the first thing we say is take care of your stress center. That's the amygdala, and learn how to spiral up out of stress. Great. You're going to feel so much better. Then take care of your reward center, your nucleus accumbens, and find every single natural way that you can to get spurts of healthy internal dopamine. When you eat sugary fatty foods, you get a dopamine high followed by a dopamine low, and that means you're addicted. So part of getting out of that overeating pattern is to learn how to give yourself those nice, gentle surges of neurotransmitters so you don't feel unrewarded. And then once the child or once the adult, because it's all the kid in us, our emotional brain is the kids inside of us. Once you don't feel stressed, you feel really safe, and chemically you're better. And then you're better in terms of dopamine and endorphins because you're rewarding yourself. The reward center is no longer toxified with all these wires. It takes about 6 weeks to have all this happen, sometimes a little more. At that point, typically people naturally exercise, they naturally eat healthier, and they can't believe it's happening to them. But if there's any leftover habits, then they're much easier to address when people already feel good or great, not when they feel like they're starving to death and just end up feeling like a big victim because they can't do what they know they should do.
Perfect. Okay, so the big thing, we know the food industry is behind a lot of the issues that we have with all of the sugars and additives and so forth. I don't want to miss out talking about the quick fix way of weight loss. Hopefully we'll have time to come back to the food industry and your opinions of that. But EBT is a training. It takes time. You have to learn the process. And there will be people that say, I can just take a pill. I can just take an injection. How do you work with those people?
Well, I just really believe everyone has the right to take any medication they want. I certainly would never want to have someone tell me what to do. It's really my own personal choice. There are advantages to each method. In other words, if you take a shot, what you're going to do is you are going to stop overeating, but you're also going to imbalance your body. And typically, after a while, that the brain downregulates the receptors for that chemical, and you'll be stuck back where you were before, and then you'll do EBT. So that's what some people do, or some people stay on the medications their whole life. But among my friends that I know who have used it, I have one dear friend who's a physician who weighs about 350 pounds, and he is using it, and he's having some help. But you can't get joy from a shot. And what humans need is brain state 1, which is joy, where they feel enlightened, they feel rewarded, they feel they're a person of purpose. If you take the symptom of a chemical imbalance and you give the person a shot on it, they won't get back to joy. They'll still be living at brain states, we'll say 3, which is essentially the feeling a little stressed, or 4, definitely stressed or stressed out. You won't have the symptom of the overeating, but you won't get to what you really need in life, which is independence, control, where your brain knows how to create those chemicals naturally, and you have those skills of EBT for life. Once you've got them, you know how to spiral up, and once you use them to rewire the circuits are gone. So you have that sense of freedom and also a certain sense of pride in the fact that your brain works in an amazing way. And also it affects relationships with your children, with your partner, with productivity. Because when you're at brain state 1, you're healthier all around in all domains of life. And that's what we do. We want you to be not only at brain state 1, but train your brain so your set point or the habit of your brain is to be in that state of connection. And you're so comfortable with your emotions that inevitably when you get stressed out again, your brain is so resilient that you dip down into the lower regions of the brain where the reptilian brain that owns us when we're really stressed, but it just pumps back up. It just goes right back up. And that freedom really is life-changing.
Let's go full circle on this. Something you said is just you're dealing with emotions. We're talking about physiology, but I don't know if we made a direct connection between why we have emotions and what they're for. And I think this is an important piece because we talk about emotions as sort of an out there, it's an esoteric thing. They are uncontrolled. They flow through us, they're emotions. But with what you are talking about here, we can actually go to that other side, go to the medical side and say, we have emotions for what?
One reason is, psychology came out a long time after biology, and psychology, unfortunately, has tainted our view of emotions. Emotions are not primarily psychological, they're biological. We have circuits in our brain, they're stored in our amygdala, in our emotional brain, that record how we respond to life. These are emotional circuits, and when they're activated, we feel emotions. If we have a circuit that has us tripping out on food or getting depressed or feeling overwhelmed, the only way we can shut that off is to process emotions. If we want to do mindfulness or we want to do cognitive behavioral therapy, which is no longer the choice of most people, because essentially you can't think your way out of an eating binge. Anyone knows that. But essentially, emotions are what give you an opportunity to change your biochemistry. If you process your emotions, it gives you an opportunity, once you've processed out of stress and back to that state, we call it homeostasis or brain state 1 or 2, you know exactly what you need. So the purpose of emotions when you're out of stress is to tell you what you need. So the emotion that comes up is telling you automatically the most important need to survive. Like, for example, let's say that you need to go to the restroom and you also need to talk to your child or your spouse, and there's competing priorities. How do you make those decisions? Through emotions, because what'll happen is that emotion will come up and it'll be the strongest emotion, points to the most important need, and then you have the passion to say, excuse me just a minute, I'm going to go to the restroom. So our whole life is based on our ability to process these emotions back to a state of connection so we know how we feel and what we need. At brain state 1 and 2, where we feel good or great, we can do that. I mean, that's super easy. You don't need EBT. But at 3, 4, or 5, the emotions become scattered at 3 and we feel anxious. At 4, they've become stuck on like being depressed or feeling in a bad mood. And 5, they become overwhelming. If you ask yourself, how do I feel? In other words, you psychologize emotions. At 3, 4, or 5, you're going to say, I don't know how I feel. I never know how I feel. I don't know what's going on. No. I'll go to the internet. I'll figure out what's wrong with me. In other words, it's a complete waste of your time. If instead at 3, 4, or 5, you say, oh, I'm at 3, what do I need? I need the 3 tool and it will get me to 1. That's the emotional tool. The 4 tool at 4 and the 5 tool. So there's 1 tool for each one, because all you really need to do is know that when you're stressed, your emotions are wacko. They are not telling you what you need. They're not only not supporting your survival, they're making you do crazy things that you say afterwards, you say, why did I do that? With EBT, you just figure out your number, you reach for the app, and you see results right from the start. You switch off that circuit, you're back to brain state 1, and your emotions will tell you exactly what you need. So again, EBT does not use emotions psychologically. It uses them as biological substrates for optimal health and control over the quality of our lives.
And I think that's a very, very critical distinction, because, again, it brings us back to this point that we are in control. And we're pushing against the clock here. Is this an app or is this a program?
It's a program because there's parts of it. We do not make the app available to anyone who's not a member of our website at ebt.org. The reason is because of ethics. You get the app and the app feels really good and people get great results, but we bring them into the program so that they are emotional brain literate. If you think of this, that the most important organ in your body is not even your heart, it is your emotional brain. And most people have no idea that your emotional brain is not something that is owned by a psychiatrist. It's owned by you. It's very simple. It only has 5 levels of stress in it. And you need to be in the driver's seat, both how to shut off those chemicals and feel better and also rewire them. So people come in, and every single day there's a complimentary session where you can just drop in by phone and listen to people using the tool. So you get inspired, you see how it works. And so we teach you first how to spiral up out of whatever stress is bothering you, any situational stress, then rewire the big four circuits that essentially raise your set point. So your brain's now in the habit of being naturally connected. And then we finish off the program with courses in how to train your brain through the rest of the emotional clutter that we all have in our lives so that you have the higher order rewards of life. If you're not hooked on the higher order rewards of life, like integrity, authenticity, peace inside, freedom, intimacy, those ideas, those concepts of this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for integrity. I'm doing this for vibrancy. When you think about what you're doing for higher purpose, the brain goes ape nuts. What it does is it starts pouring out all these beautiful neurochemicals that shut off the stress response, and then it's easy to do anything. So it's three parts: learn how to be resilient, rewire four circuits, and then raise your brain's set point so that you're naturally in a state of connection more of the time. Now, you would think you'd have to go to therapy for 10 or 20 years. This is a 1-year program. People start transforming in the first 3 months, but we want lasting change. And this is why. If we keep, as a society, treating the symptoms of stress, which everything that you're thinking of, every problem that you can imagine that our country's having right now is a symptom of people not adjusting how they process stress for the stress overload of our times and getting the EBT tools. And so if we just go after every single problem with a pill or a treatment so that we don't have these symptoms of stress, but we're still sitting on dynamite because we're still stressed out, what happens is even the circuits we rewire will be reinstated. So it's not safe to hang out in chronic stress. That's what causes accelerated aging. That's what it contributes to so many conditions like cancer. So we just say, if you're coming into this program, you can just use the app. You still have to be a member, but we're going to show you how you can change your life really easily when you learn how to rewire, and you'll love it so much because your life is so different once you know how to process your stress overload that you stay with it until your set point is now in that connected state. And that's the number one power we have over the quality of our lives, the set point of our brain, not in stress, but in connection and joy.
You know, we started off the show using EBT for weight loss. We're ending off the show learning how different applications for this can be so effective in different areas of our lives. Not everybody has a weight loss problem or has a weight problem that is stressed. So I'm assuming, I may be speaking for you, that anybody who may think, yeah, I don't need to lose weight, but I would really like to investigate trying to manage my stress better, this is for them as well.
We offer 2 complete programs. One is for stress eating because there's such an epidemic now of stress eating. It's really just not having the skills to rewire it. And the other one is stress overload, and that's for everyone, whether it's relationship stress. One of the most sensitive to stress is relationships, because only at brain state 1 can we really give and receive love. Can we keep our boundary but still give love? So relationships are very vulnerable to stress. Children are very vulnerable to stress. And the epidemics we have now of anxiety, depression, and PTSD are simply not being treated sufficiently with mental health care. Because unless people have the skills between therapy sessions to knock out those circuits, to rewire the anxieties and depressions, they go for 1 hour, and then all week long, they're vulnerable because they don't know how to rewire and to take charge of their emotional brain. So they go very, very slowly. If you want to fast forward your therapy, bolt on EBT and you'll see a huge difference.
Wonderful. Now, we are at the end of our show, unfortunately. Where can people go to look for information about you, about the program online, I'm assuming?
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, go to EBT, Emotional Brain Training, ebt.org. It's also under ebtconnect.net. And right there for $1, we had a grateful patient who gave us $500,000. And what she said was, we want everyone in the United States to have these tools. It saved my marriage. It saved my life. So we now offer for $1 the first month. If EBT hasn't changed your life so dramatically after 1 month, then you de-enroll. But what we're finding is people are staying because it's changing them that much. So go to ebt.org. Also, I have a new book out called 123 Joy. It's how instead of using weight loss drugs, you can get those chemicals naturally. You can balance out your brain, and you can stop the drive to overeat, not just when you're having those injections, but for life. So it's 123 Joy. There's a few other books there. There's the Stress Overload Solution and the Stress Eating Solution. Lots of books, but mainly if you're the person that needs to read a lot, go get one of my most recent books, and also come to our website. You can log on to my Zoom also, and I give talks every night, and we have people there every day to help make this process of getting from stress to joy so much more reliable and so much more fun. You'll never go back once you've used it.
I really thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This technique is wonderful. I just see the potential in so many different areas. So congratulations on that. And thank you for joining us on the Health Hub.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Kathy.
Everybody, we will talk to you next week on the Health Hub.
You have been listening to The Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi, here on